And I will say, with Justin Watson injured, Skyy Moore seems to be taking the fourth receiver reps behind the top three guys. I'm really excited for this safety group. It might be the best in the league, honestly, if they all play up to expectation. Butker was doing field goals towards the end of practice, I believe, and he did miss a few. They both went left, and you got to wonder, is that something with the holding? The Sunday stretch he had against Xavier Worthy really was eye-popping, I'm not going to lie. When that happened, I was just like, whoa, this guy must be a dude. I think they're both strong run blockers, and I think they're both shaky pass protectors right now, so this competition is not over.
Well, today I have a conversation with Ron Kopp Jr., the lead analyst of Arrowhead Pride, about pretty much every position group on the Chiefs roster and how they've looked so far during the 4 days he's attended Chiefs training camp. He answers questions like, does rees-zammit look ready for a roster spot? How is Kadarius Toney doing compared to Skyy Moore and Justyn Ross? Is FAU looking ready to take that sophomore leap? We talk about all that and more, so let's get into it. But first, how about those? Training camp is in full swing, and you've been to 4 practices, I believe. You were at the first one, and then you were most recently at the 3 padded practices they had, which was, off the top of my head, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I think. So
yes,
let's talk about what you've seen. I trust your eye, and let's just get right into things. We'll go offense, and then we'll go defense here in a bit. Wide receivers, let's just start there. People love wide receivers. First off, how has Xavier Worthy looked in your limited looks of him? I know he's battled some illness and stuff, but how's he looked so far out there as they've been ramping him up?
Well, it's definitely a lot of vertical stuff, right? I mean, that's definitely what you're seeing from him, is using that speed to push safeties deep, open up space over the middle for Travis Kelce, for Rashee Rice, even for Hollywood Brown. You know, Hollywood Brown is, not all of his production is coming, deep in camp. You know, he's making some intermediate plays as well. But yeah, I think they're really using Xavier's speed. And you saw it that first day of camp, right? That big play that went viral. But honestly, since the pads have come on, he hasn't gotten that much space. You know, he hasn't been able to manufacture the same space to get open and make as many plays. Obviously, yeah, he did miss a few practices last week. But when the pads were on this weekend, he really didn't make that many plays. Trent McDuffie locked him up a few times. And that's going to be a great battle, right? I mean, that's going to really test him, make him better. But iron sharpening iron. But yeah, it is an interesting thing that, Worthy's going to have to battle through that kind of physical coverage the Chiefs have, and that every NFL defense has is going to present him once he gets, to week 1.
That's what I wondered once the pads came on, because Worthy's approximately 170 pounds. Has he looked that in some of his routes, kind of getting bullied a little bit? Have you noticed that early on here?
Well, that's the thing is the Chiefs do have bigger physical corners and defensive backs, right? I mean, even McDuffie, he's the smallest one. He still plays with this physicality, this strength, just at the point of attack and just with, throughout a play. So yeah, I think he is struggling with that a little bit. But I don't think he doesn't look, like he can't overcome it or anything. I think he actually has a pretty good frame to him. He's about 6 feet tall. It's not, a frame that doesn't feel like he can add to it. I feel like he maybe can get a little stronger and still maintain that speed. So I think it's just something that he'll have to work through as he goes into his NFL career. He's still super young, man, right? He was a true junior at Texas last year. I mean, we're talking about, 20, I think he's 21 years old, 22 years old.
I could go down that rabbit trail, but the Chiefs I feel like they love to bet on guys that they see the traits, but are also super young and haven't even close to peak yet. You see that with like FAU, which we'll talk about him in a bit, really young guys. So love that. And I thought he would struggle a little bit with the weight thing, maybe getting slightly bullied, but I'm not overly concerned about it, at least at this point in time. A receiver some people are concerned about, and you've been there 3 days in pads, you've seen it. Can you tell us about Skyy Moore? I feel like most of what I see on Twitter is he's struggling, but he's got to have some bright spots too, or am I deceived because I'm not there? What are your thoughts on Skyy Moore and how he's looking so far at camp?
Yeah, I mean, he is easy to pile on, right? And I think he is someone that definitely has had some lowlights that have stood out to me at camp, just in terms of it's the same stuff, right? Where he's just an inch away from, the ball being in his hands. And I don't think that's necessarily because Mahomes is being inaccurate with his throw. I think a lot of it is Skyy just really not breaking out of his routes, I guess, with proper explosion and timing, and just kind of lackadaisical with his route running at times. And I think that's been his problem his entire career. And I think you have seen it a couple times in camp. But I will say, I think it was Sunday, he runs a crossing route in the red zone, going to the corner in the end zone. McDuffie, really good coverage, trailing him. Skyy still goes up and gets it. It was kind of reminiscent maybe of that Denver play last year, where he does drop it in Denver, kind of ends the game there. Kind of reminiscent where Skyy secures it this time. That was a positive sign. And I will say, with Justin Watson injured right now, Skyy Moore definitely seems to be taking the fourth receiver reps behind the top three guys. So, I think the team is still wanting to give him, the runway to prove whether or not he should still be around, but it still feels like there's some of the same issues. So I'm curious to see if that continues to go on through camp in the preseason.
It's interesting to note that Skyy is, it makes sense. Skyy's a guy that gets Watson reps immediately, like the next man up in the pecking order. But some of the stuff you said a little bit ago, a wide receiver going into his third year, and he's still like off timing a bit with Mahomes. It's, I don't know, a bit concerning, I guess, to say the least, considering, he was a second round pick. I know he's probably one of the guys fighting for a spot, but there are several others that we could at least chat about. Kadarius Toney is a guy that I think would most likely make the roster if he stays healthy and kind of holds up. But then you've also got Justyn Ross, Nico Remigio, Montreal Washington. So I figure we could kind of go there quickly, and then we'll bounce around to some other position groups. How's Kadarius Toney looked to you? It seems like he's got a little higher stock than Skyy, but would love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, right? They're trying him at running back, or just and not completely, right? It's not like he's only lining up at running back. I think it's just been in a few drills and a few plays and team periods. But I think there's one of two ways you could look at that, right? You could say, oh, well, he's this versatile piece. That's a way that gives him value for the team. That's why he may make the roster this year and not get cut. But it also could kind of be a last-ditch effort by the team trying to find how they can use him in this offense. And maybe it's a sign that they are maybe ready to move on, in the receiver room. So I think it could go one or two ways, honestly, because it is weird. He does rotate in with the first team, but he'll line up with the third team and at receiver and make a catch in 7-on-7 or team 2. So, that might just be getting him as many reps as possible. But it does feel like Mecole, has a higher, impression to the staff than he does, and then I would even say Skyy still does, just because I think, again, his receiver rotation. I think they just want to make him work. Again, it's only, you could make the argument, it's still only year 3. Toney, it's going into year 4 now. So it is interesting. I think I still feel like he will be around because they like, his individual talent when he's healthy. Nagy always tries to talk about him, I feel like. I think they really do like his, they want to use it. It's just whether he's on the field. So I'm leaning towards he'll be around, but it is weird. He's just kind of all over the place at camp.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know what to think of Toney coming into camp. He wasn't really at OTAs. He did show up to mandatory camp. But then coming off the season he did last year, it's like, well, I think I've seen more bright spots of him than I expected, which maybe it's not even a ton. And he's held up so far at camp, which is great as far as durability, health-wise. I see an ankle wrapped, but other than that, he seems okay. So I'll definitely be intrigued. You mentioned Mecole. I didn't even have him on my list because, honestly, I think he more than likely makes the roster. I know you could move on from him, and there's not a lot of financial repercussions. He's basically on a vet min deal. I just think they know what they get with Mecole. He can play anywhere along the offense as needed, and then he's a depth guy, could be your returner. So I think Mecole is pretty safe, but I'll be curious to see how that ends up shaking out, especially when you've got some of those guys battling for the bottom spots. One guy that is a fan favorite is Nico Remigio. How's he look to you out there?
Hey, I will say with Nico, he's getting the rotation reps that kind of indicates that the team likes him. Nagy talks about him, quite a bit too. I would say, he highlights him. So it does feel like the team is looking to maybe have him as that bottom of the roster. If they do keep 7 receivers, maybe he's the 7th, maybe he's even the 6th. But I will say, Montreal Washington is doing everything possible to overtake that, honestly. Like, we think about Nico Remigio just because he was kind of a camp standout last year to an extent, but Montreal Washington was a 5th-round pick 2 years ago. Just kind of, and it was in Denver. Denver hasn't been exactly the most functional organization the last few years with how their roster building and kind of how they've been doing things. You never know. This guy could actually be a pretty, he was a punt returner at one point for the Chiefs, within the last year. And man, I mean, this catch was ridiculous. I couldn't believe he made this catch, but he's made a few, man. He's made a few. There was one, and the Chiefs tweeted it too, from I think Saturday, on a deep post where he laid out and just perfectly secures it, tucks it in, no chance that it touches the ground, when he rolls. Yeah, Nico's the one that's definitely, getting all the publicity, but man, Montre Washington's doing everything he can to kind of take over that spot. And I think there's a chance he could. I mean, he's the one who's actually played, active NFL snaps so far. So maybe they value that experience.
He had some punts for the Chiefs when there was injuries. They called him up. They might even sign him to the roster at one point last year. They definitely called him up from the practice squad a few times, and he saw some punt returns. I think one kick return. So they at least trust him enough back there, so you know what you have in him there. And yeah, I've heard nothing but good things so far about Montrell. That one-handed catch, he didn't get both feet in bounds, but still, that was insane. I'm excited to see just kind of how it shakes out as time goes on, and obviously injuries can play a role too. Hopefully, there's nothing super crazy going on with Justin Watson's foot or anything like that, but that could affect the pecking order as well. Let's move on to left tackle. Kingsley Suamataia seems to be getting the majority of the first team reps, or all of them almost, when the pads are on. Yesterday's practice was their 10-10-10, and he did split again with Wanya. But they split it. They were splitting earlier in camp before the pads come on. How have they looked, both Wanya and Kingsley? And do you think the Chiefs are trying, at least so far, to give Kingsley all the opportunities to maybe, is it his spot to lose? Or what are your thoughts there on the left tackle battle?
That's what kind of my initial thoughts were, right? Is that, well, yeah, he's taking all the snaps. He took every snap of the first 3 padded practices. It's got to be his job to lose. But, the more I think about it, the more you kind of zoom out, it might just be a way to kind of accelerate Kingsley's development with this competition, right? Wanya has already played a whole year, with taking these snaps. So maybe in their minds, it's like, well, let's give Kingsley all these snaps, just because we've kind of seen Wanya just to an extent a little bit, obviously not enough. But he did start a few games last year. But that's my thing, is I've been impressed with Kingsley's athleticism. I think we all knew he was going to be a freak athlete on the offensive line. He just flies off the ball, on the front side and backside of zone runs. He's just getting on defensive linemen so quickly, or cutting off linebackers. He's absolutely a very strong fit, in that regard, and the run game part of it. But so is Wanya. Wanya is a very strong run blocker. That's something that he really, was already good at last year. He's got them long arms. He's got those big churning legs that he will drive. I think they're both strong run blockers, and I think they're both shaky pass protectors right now. So I think this competition is not over. I do think they're just giving Kingsley maybe the runway to, again, get all those snaps. But Kingsley has definitely been a little shaky whenever he's been in his pass sets. Whenever it's a true pass set, someone's really coming down on him. When it's any sort of counter move, man, he just really struggles to kind of go from his base pass set to kind of moving with the move and staying in front of him with both his hands and his feet. Right? Maybe his hands will go with and his feet leave behind, and then he's lunging, or he just misses with his hands altogether. I really feel like he has some room to go as a pass protector, and that's why this battle isn't over. And Wanya has some room to go too, but again, he's had the year of experience, and that may help him a little bit. But maybe over this next month, Kingsley can improve enough in that respect to make the Chiefs feel good about keeping him in there.
I will say something that makes me feel good personally is the return, or the near return, of Joe Toney. I feel like if you're going to have a left tackle over there that's a bit like, we're not sure at times. It might help to have the best guard, left guard, arguably the best guard in football, right next to him. So they're ramping him up, which is great. But even with that, even with Joe Toney there, if the Chiefs aren't liking what they see enough out of both Kingsley and Wanya, do you think a veteran could still be brought in like Donovan Smith? Or is your mind not even really there yet?
They could, but I feel like they would have done it by now. I don't think Andy wants to have and hey, I guess Donovan Smith is someone that would know the playbook. So maybe that's, the kind of the counter to that. Cause I would just think Andy wouldn't want to bring someone in that late in the process to be, a dependable starter, especially at left tackle. But at the same time, I could see it happening. The thing is, though, they really have survived with, average to below average left tackle play, at times in the Mahomes run. Last year, Donovan Smith wasn't always very good, although he did settle in and play pretty well in the playoff run. So, hey, maybe they just kind of roll with it, run the ball, kind of keep pressure off that left tackle position. And I hope they do that. Let one of the guys develop if you're gonna do that, right?
I think at this point, that's probably the best way to go. You took Kingsley in the second. He was mocked by some in the first, end of the first round. So, I mean, you got a guy, might as well just give him the reps. But I guess we'll see. You mentioned running the ball. Let's talk running backs a little bit. A lot of people are interested, very, very curious about Louis Rees-Zammit, the Welshman. I understand he hasn't played football, and this is basically his first time ever playing it in pads for 3 days. He's got 3 days of experience. How's he looked out there in your eyes? I understand he's athletic, he's got speed, but what's he looked like out there to you?
The first thing that comes to mind watching him is just like pad level, right? It's just, it's not natural right now for him to have lower pad level, and that definitely shows up. It showed up the worst for him, unfortunately, in the 1v1 pass protection drills. I think there were some clips that went around on that, but I mean, it was, he just got run over a little bit. He's just not used to, having to sink your hips like that and really catch someone, right? I don't think, you necessarily have to do that much in rugby, necessarily have a little more momentum a lot of the times, right? But I will say there were a few runs where, he did. Again, his pad level is not very low, but he is kind of scampering. He has the quick feet to kind of change direction quickly. And there was one he kind of squeezed through all of a sudden and on an off tackle run kind of got through. I'm excited to see him continue to grow, but I mean, it just feels like there's a long way to go here.
Yeah, I understand the primary way he would make the roster, like if it went that way, is through special teams on kick returns. Have you got to take a look at some of the kick return periods at all? What does that look like to you so far in your few looks there?
Honestly, I haven't honestly seen them in kick return period. I have missed that. I know they've used him on kicking, which is interesting. I mean, I don't know if they want him necessarily being that extra tackler. That's not really the advantage you get, right? We talked about Justyn Reed being the kickoff kicker, so he can be that extra tackler. I don't think you necessarily get that with him. I don't, he is being new to football. Rugby, obviously you do tackle, so maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. But I did hear, I think it was Tucker Franklin. He tweeted that he like drop kicked something like a ball perfectly 30 yards away, like right to a coach's chest. Like maybe there's something they can do with that too on those kick returns. Dave Tobin and Andy, they'll cook something up. So we'll see it in the preseason. It will be interesting.
Speaking of special teams, I'm just thinking about it before we go back to the running back room. Have you seen anything out of Matt Araiza, particularly him working with Butker placeholding? Have you been able to see that? If not, it's okay. But I was just curious because that was a bright spot of Townsend. They had that real good connect, the trinity of long snapper, placeholder to place kicker. I'm curious if you've seen any of that or what you've heard about him working with Butker. Yeah,
I will say, you definitely have seen them like working, to the side on it. Him doing a lot of holding stuff. But there was, I think it was Sunday, Harrison Butker was doing field goals towards the end of practice, I believe, like in a live team period. And he did miss a few. He missed a few. And they both went left. And you got to wonder, is that, something with the holding? I can't imagine Harrison Butker missing too many, I should say, not many times he's missing 2 straight field goals. And that was what it was. We were all kind of looking around like, oh, wow. So I think that's a great point and something that is going to be an underrated thing this year. Harrison Butker's been so clutch, but, it may not be his fault if he misses an important kick. And that's something that we took for granted the last few years of Tommy Townsend.
I mean, that's something that I hope, Araiza and Butker, just as time goes on here, preseason and all that, they get that under their belt. Because we know, like, Matt can punt. I saw the tweet. He punted from the opposite 40 and deaded it at the 4. I'm like, wow. So we know he can punt. He's a lefty too, which is cool, a little bit more unique. So I like that. Just hope they can get the placeholder aspect down, like in sync and rhythm with Butker. Back to the running back room, unless you had more to say there. Deneric Prince has been getting a lot of reps immediately following Pacheco. Maybe some are saying, hey, this could be, if not RB2, maybe it is CEH. We know he's been in and out of practice. He actually shared a rather transparent Twitter post yesterday about him dealing with PTSD and having some flare-ups there, which is crazy. I've never experienced it, but hopefully he's getting the help that he needs. But with him kind of in and out of practice, Deneric Prince has been the next guy up pretty much immediately after Pacheco every practice. How's he look to you And what are your thoughts on the running back room right now?
Yeah, I wonder if they're just giving Deneric Prince those looks with the starting offensive line, with the starting unit, because, hey, they know what they have in Clyde. Clyde is a very, there's really not a mystery about what you're getting with Clyde anymore. And that's not, necessarily to be a negative. I mean, I think last year you saw him, be a situational playmaker. I mean, honestly, I think one thing we're going to see with Clyde this year, maybe that is underrated that we hadn't thought about, maybe is maybe being more of a pass protector. I think he can give you a little chip on the edge. He's got that thickness to him a little bit, that bulk to him, where he can kind of put a shoulder into you. If you're an edge rusher, kind of help your offensive tackle. He's good in the screen game. So I think there is a chance that Clyde is still that second running back, that change of pace running back to Pacheco, and then the third running back. It does look like it's Deneric Prince right now. But maybe they're just trying to give Prince those looks. So in case, obviously, he does need to play more in the season, he's kind of ready for it. But I would still keep an eye on Keaontay Ingram. It does feel like he's seldom worked in. He's kind of been that next guy, but he really hasn't done much with the starters. I feel like he was my running back 3 going into training camp. Deneric Prince has definitely showed out, and I get why they like him, but I think he's a pretty similar runner to Pacheco. I think Keaontay Ingram gives you a little bit of different play style, so I would watch for him. Hopefully in the preseason he can kind of show something and maybe earn some more starting reps.
I'm intrigued about Keaontay as well. He's got a little NFL experience under his belt where, I mean, Prince has a year in the system, but hasn't really played a lot of reps. Carson Steele is a guy a lot of people are intrigued about, whether it's the hair, the gator, or them kind of using him as like a running back, fullback hybrid. Have you been seeing any of that? And has he been working with mainly the 3s, the 2s? How's he looked out there to you so far?
Yeah, you've seen him at fullback. I mean, Andy just running his, seldom traditional I formation. He'll still throw it in there. But Carson Steele is not the starting fullback in those scenarios, it looks like. Noah Gray actually was the one lining up in the backfield, 3-point stance, firing out. But Carson Steele was that next guy up. And you see him just take straight running back reps too. So, yeah, he's interesting, man. He might be, the Chiefs' journey back to fullback, getting a fullback back on the roster that can do a little more. He is definitely more of a true runner than, the Michael Burtons and the Anthony Shermans of the past. And you imagine he's got to be a good special teamer too. So maybe that's really what you got to look out for in preseason to see if he'll earn a spot.
I feel like that's what's intrigued me about just what you said. He is a bit more of a true runner, but he's only like 8 pounds lighter than Burton, which is crazy. He's big.
Right.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
I see the intrigue there. But yeah, we'll see. I know they've been using Noah Gray in that role. They've also reportedly been using Irv Smith Jr. in that role. He's seemed to have his moments at camp too. How's he looked? He's a guy that I have on the roster right now as like tight end 4, probably making the roster if the Chiefs roll with 4 tight ends. How's he looked out there to you? And maybe real quick on Jared Wiley as well after that.
Yeah, so honestly on both of them, they both made plays in the red zone, which I think is important, right? I think Wiley going into this season, or I guess when we drafted him, that was kind of his thing, is he was a really big red zone threat at TCU. And you've definitely seen the Chiefs use that with Mahomes, with the starters, use him on routes to the back of the end zone, kind of using his size, his height, throwing those layered passes over defenders' hands. But Irv Smith has also made a few red zone plays. He was actually he scored twice against the starting defense when he was with the second string in a red zone period. Caught a ball as Brian Cook kind of contested. It was a strong play on Irv Smith's part. So, yeah, no, nice. I think Irv Smith is definitely looking the part of a tight end 4, a guy that can come in and just be a reliable pass catcher. I think he can probably. He's not going to be the strongest blocker, but I do think he's improved in that area and can be, enough, right? Capable. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think they do keep 4 tight ends, and he's on the roster.
And Jared Wiley is a rookie. He's still learning the system, probably drinking from a fire hose right now. Had a crazy one-handed catch down the right side. I don't even know if the pads were on yet at that time, but it was crazy. He made some. How's he looking? I know you shared a little bit, but how's he looking in your eyes?
Yeah, no, he really does remind you of and it's just, aesthetically, right? The young Kelsey, I always remember Travis Kelce in that 2014 preseason, the year after he got hurt, 2014, his second year, it was his coming out party. And he was just that tall, long, lanky, just linear speed down the field. He had those 2 long bomb touchdowns in the preseason. I remember where he was just catching and running, just outrunning everybody. We're like, God, what is this, freak of a tight end? And Wiley just has that same aesthetic where he's just so long, but he just has such a good stride. And when he's in the open field, he really just looks like he's eating up space and eating up ground. But again, I really feel like you've seen him do his most work with the starters in the red zone. And so I am looking forward to that. I think Jody Fortson, you think about a couple of years ago, he was a red zone threat. He was a big play threat at times. I think Jared Wiley, maybe because he's a rookie, he's not an upgrade to that right away, but I think he can be at least what Jody was a couple of years ago. And if everyone remembers, our 3 tight end sets were a very big reason why we won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Very efficient passing out of those sets. That I think we're going to get back to that this year.
That's pretty exciting to me, especially when you not only have an upgrade there, but then the wide receiver room in theory is upgraded. From almost all aspects, if you're looking at Hollywood Brown and what you hope Worthy can be. So I'm definitely excited about that. You mentioned red zone threats, and I think I forgot to really follow up and ask you about Justyn Ross. What are you thinking about him? He made the 53 last year. He is a red zone guy. I know they lined him up out there with recently with maybe even him and Jared Wiley, and we're throwing red zone targets to them. What's your stock on Justyn Ross and how he's looked? I know we're way out of the wide receiver room, but I think of big-bodied receivers, and we were just talking tight ends. So how's he looking to you?
Yeah, he's not making as many plays as I feel like he was last year, right? I feel like in camp last year, he really was truly standing out and earning the hype. I feel like he was constantly connecting with Mahomes on downfield passes, and this year it's just not the same. I think I recall the first day I was out there when there was no pads on yet, that Sunday practice, just a bunch of passes just getting knocked away from him, right? He wasn't going up and getting them, and he wasn't creating the separation either. A lot of his targets were just kind of jump ball kind of things, and that's what he does best, right? And so you did see when the pads came on, he did complete some more of those passes. He had a really nice, jump ball touchdown with Carson Wentz throwing in the ball at one practice. I do think, he has the same skill set he had last year. I think the receiver room's just better, and so I think he might just get squeezed out as compared to last year. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of only really being kind of a one-dimensional receiver, unfortunately. And the Chiefs really like to have receivers that can do a lot of different things.
It's interesting you noted the separation aspect. I interviewed Seth Kaiser a little while ago in the lead up to camp, and he did say that was his main knock on Justyn Ross is at the NFL level. He's really struggled with creating separation, even with the limited looks we've seen from him out there, given a suspension and all that. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be intrigued. If you had to take 2 wide receivers at the bottom of this roster to make it, who are you rolling with right now? If the Chiefs roll with 6.
So yeah, so if you're outside the top 4, with Justin Watson being that 4th, Mecole Hardman's the 5th. Honestly, I do think they'll just keep 6. I think they got 4 tight ends that they like. I think they'll have, the backfield, the offensive line. They have 2 rookies. They're going to have to keep that stocked. So yeah, I think they keep 6, and I think that 6th receiver right now probably is Kadarius Toney. I know we're getting excited about other guys, but a guy like Nico Remigio, honestly, I feel like he hasn't done enough to justify not just being another practice squad guy and further developing. He was hurt last year too. He did miss that entire year of being able to develop physically as a professional athlete. So I do think we might be a little premature on some of these guys. And again, I think Remigio Washington could push any of those guys. But I think it's just 6 this year.
And hey, I know you got to go here in a few minutes, so I do want to talk defense real quick. There's a couple people in particular. How's FAU? Felix Anudike-Uzomah look to you so far at camp? I'm hoping for a big step forward with him. You've got Karlaftis, you've got Dana, you've got some guys on the edge. Chris Jones can kick out at times, but you've got BJ Thompson, health scare. You have a Minihue still rehabbing back. So I am hoping FAU takes that big step up. How's he look so far to you?
Yeah, I think you can see some sort of jump from year one. I think so. I think physically you can see that he's gotten stronger. He's just gotten, just everything's more fluid, more, fast. He's just kind of I think his play speed has kind of caught up a little quick, more to the NFL. But again, I say all this with caution just because he is going against Wanya Morris and Kingsley, pretty much primarily. I don't think he's faced Jawan Taylor once this camp. He's really just coming from the left side. And that's the other thing is he hasn't rotated in with the starters really, except on just a few times. They've done a pass rush package where, the D tackle besides Chris Jones comes out and Felix comes in as that third defensive end. And then I think Dana moves inside. So I've really liked what we've seen from him as a pass rusher though. He's shown some really, really, just fluid in terms of just, going from one move to the next, punching and then spinning inside. He really got Kingsley good. I tweeted that out on 1v1 from Saturday or Sunday. So, yeah, I think we're seeing progress, but I really want to see it against someone else besides these two developing offensive tackles. Let's see if he can still show that against a true starter in the NFL.
Hoping for the best for him, and I'm excited for him to get some more reps under his belt here, training camp and preseason, as he heads into year 2. Linebacker room, I don't want to stay here too long. I feel like the main guys. I mean, Tranquil's flying all around. You know what you got in Bolton. I feel like Chanel, he'll take a step up. Is there any other linebacker outside of them, though, that you're like, oh, this guy caught my eye? I don't know if Cam Jones, Curtis Jacobs, anybody out there, like, hey, this could be the next man up in the pecking order, at least heavily contributing on teams?
Yeah, I will say real quick that Jack Cochran is definitely like more solid and more like he doesn't get enough credit for I think he's a really, really solid player and a lock on the roster. I didn't really consider him that, but you just kind of see him play. Like, he is kind of all over it, man. I think that those experience these years have added up for him. So shout out him. But you did mention Curtis Jacobs. I have really been intrigued with his size and just how fluid he is. I keep saying the word fluid, but just he's so easy moving. He's so smooth moving through the box, navigating the box. There was a few plays I feel like I saw him as an off-ball linebacker where he's just kind of reading the run flow and just really just like so effortlessly kind of just mirroring it and attacking the gap that he needs to. I feel like sometimes with linebackers, they're so rigid when it goes from side to side and then forward. I feel like, I don't know, I just was seeing some really smooth movements from him, and he's got good size, man. He's a really solid size for a linebacker. So he's intriguing to me for sure. I think he might overtake Cam Jones for that 6th linebacker spot, which I do think they will. Or excuse me, I think Cochran would be the 4th linebacker. So I guess 5th linebacker spot for Curtis Jacobs potentially. That they probably don't need to keep 6 this year, but we'll see. They did last year. They kept 6.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see how like the new kickoff rules, if any of the like linebacker or cornerbacks, like how many they opt to go with just with the new rules and how that looks. But right. I appreciate your thoughts there. I was intrigued about Curtis Jacobs as well. Before we get out of here, let's talk secondary briefly. Cornerback 2, I feel like is completely up in the air. I know Nazee's competing, but he's battling some injury. Jalen Watson obviously will be in the mix there. He's still nursing the shoulder recovery. You've got Kelvin Joseph now working in there. Spags said yesterday, hey, he's made enough plays. He's earned some looks with the ones. That's what he's been doing. What are your thoughts on the cornerback room? And I mean, outside of Trent McDuffie with Snead gone, I feel like it's a big question mark. But I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, it is definitely a big question mark. I mean, Spags is making it very clear that, he'd just like someone to prove themselves, and no one has. And maybe that's just him being, hardball and trying to really, get the most out of him. Because Joshua Williams has obviously kind of said like, hey, I want to be it. I want to be the guy. But man, I will just point out Kelvin Joseph because he was someone I didn't really have on my radar going into camp. I just feel like they have so many guys that they've developed themselves or they've brought in themselves that I just kind of figured, is he really, someone from another team that's already kind of had some chances to make it in the NFL? Is he really going to come in and take over these guys that they're developing? But man, the Sunday stretch he had against Xavier Worthy really was eye-popping. I'm not going to lie. I mean, he really stuck to him a couple times on a slant. He came down hard on him, broke it up, and then he was kind of covering him from the slot. Xavier Worthy tried to kind of move in, fake inside, then go on an out route, and Kelvin Joseph just stuck with him. Perfect, kind of technique in terms of swiping away at the ball with his backhand. It was kind of one of those things where you just like when that happened, I was just like, whoa, like okay, like this guy must be a dude. And so now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, yeah, he's probably making the roster, and it does go to show you that when Nazee and Jalen Watson have been hurt, that he has been rotating in. And man, I even will say on Sunday, Joshua Williams rotated in with the second team all of a sudden. Like he was with like the second team defense when he hadn't been all camp, and that coincidentally was the same day Kelvin Joseph had a nice day. So just interesting, man. I think Kelvin Joseph might be a sneaky dark horse for that second cornerback spot.
I am very intrigued because don't want to read too much into the 10-10-10 practice, but he was once again Kelvin with the ones. Joshua Williams was once again with the twos. So I'll be curious this next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday stretch when the pads come on again, what that's going to look like, because I feel like that is one of the biggest question marks right now on this entire roster. Before we get out of here, safety room with Justin Reid out. How's Chamari Connor and Jaden Hicks looked so far? And just with your viewing of the secondary out there.
Man, I am so excited for this safety group. I mean, I have been. I mean, I think since they drafted B. Cook a couple years ago, like he was a really, I liked him before the draft. I think he's just, he's just been a fun dude to kind of follow. He's kind of got that mentality, that attitude you like. But
you said Brian Cook looked super healthy. He's flying around.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like he had that ankle injury last year that really disrupted a very strong sophomore season he was having as that starting free safety, with Justin Reid. And I was reading back on it, he didn't fracture his ankle, which it was such a gruesome injury. I kind of forgot that it didn't turn into an actual fracture. So that kind of maybe is what's playing into him looking, so 100% right away. Cause man, he really is. He is flying all over the field in the back end. He is covering up deep routes. He should have had an interception of Mahomes on Sunday where Mahomes bought time in the pocket and launched one deep, but B. Cook was just step for step with Xavier Worthy all the way down the field, 60 yards down the field, and honestly got two hands on it, just dropped it. And then in red zone, man, I'm telling you, like it looks honey badgerish out there where he is just everywhere. Like you can tell he's just reading Mahomes' eyes and he's just, going wherever he needs to. He's broken on a few passes and knocked them away, where Mahomes kind of thought he had a window there. I mean, he is just so instinctual and that's the thing. He also caused a fumble in team against Pacheco. Like that's where the honey badger thing like pops in my head. He doesn't play necessarily the same play style where, he's more of like a free safety where he's in the back end. He's really covering over the top. Honey Badger is always more of that slot guy, closer to the box playmaker. But just the way he's instinctual around the ball, breaking on the ball, just anticipating stuff, reading. I mean, he is looking. I don't know. I know it's just practice, but I mean, it's Mahomes. It's the Chiefs' offense. So I mean, who else?
Mm-hmm.
If he's catching Mahomes off guard, sometimes can't imagine what he's gonna maybe be able to do. Maybe jump in a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback's route. So B. Cook, Chamari Connor, obviously just laying the wood a few practices. I'm really excited for this safety group. It might be the best in the league, honestly, if they all play up to expectation.
Yeah, I'm hoping that quad injury of Justin Reid is pretty minor and he's back whenever. But I do feel like, Brian Cook, Connor, like I'm super excited about Swiss Army Knife Connor. That's what I've been calling him. He's used all over the place. And then Jaden Hicks, I mean, I don't know how much he'll contribute on defense this year. Maybe a little bit more if Justin Reid starts out not playing, but I'm excited for his future too. Very excited about the safety room. Very excited about the Chiefs roster in general. I feel like they've taken a lot of great steps forward in a lot of areas. And Ron, I appreciate your time so much. I know you got to get out of here, but man, where is this the main place you want people to come find you? Is
yes, sir.
X, Twitter? Make sure to follow Ron Kopp on Twitter, man. He's a great follow, always posting great stuff. And as always, appreciate all that you do. And thanks so much for coming on here and taking your time out before you had to get out of here.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me, man. It was a great time.